subscribe, like, comment, because once this story starts, there's no backing out, and you'll want to hear every last word. The man who is already dead. The sirens arrived too late. By the time the patrol cars screamed into the dirt parking lot behind the Magnolia Lounge, the smell of gunpowder had already gone stale. Blue and red lights washed over the sagging brick building like a police strobe at a crime scene funeral. Inside, the jukebox was still playing, an old soul track crackling through blown speakers, because no one had thought to turn it off. The body lay behind the bar. She was face down, one arm bent unnaturally beneath her torso, blonde hair soaked dark with blood. The register drawer had been ripped out and left open, coins scattered like breadcrumbs across the sticky floor. 2 bullets, one to the chest, one to the head, execution style. Small-town Alabama had seen violence before, but not like this. Not here. Within an hour, the sheriff had a suspect. His name was Elijah Mercer, and by sunrise, he was already being called a murderer. Elijah Mercer was arrested 3 miles away, standing on the front porch of his modest ranch-style home, still wearing his work boots. He didn't run. He didn't resist. He just stared at the cuffs as they snapped shut around his wrists, his brow furrowed like a man trying to solve a puzzle no one had explained to him. "I didn't do this," he said quietly. No one wrote it down. By noon, his face was on every local channel. By evening, the story had hardened into a narrative too clean to question. Black man, white female victim, night shift bar, cash missing, case closed. The town exhaled in relief. The truth never got the chance to breathe. 6 months later, Elijah Mercer sat on death row. The room was no bigger than a walk-in closet. Concrete walls, steel bars, a toilet that flushed whenever the cell next door did. The clock above the guard station ticked loudly, like it was counting down to something everyone pretended wasn't coming. Elijah had stopped counting the days. He'd been convicted in less than a week. The trial had been swift, efficient, and devastating. 3 witnesses claimed they saw him near the bar that night. A jailhouse informant swore Elijah confessed. The murder weapon, a .38 revolver, was never found, but the prosecution argued he disposed of it in the river. His public defender met him twice. The jury took 2 hours. The sentence came down like a hammer. Death. When Elijah heard the word, his knees buckled. He didn't cry. He didn't scream. He just whispered the same sentence he'd been saying since the night of the murder. "I wasn't there." The guards dragged him out anyway. 200 miles away, in a cramped office above a bail bond shop, a young lawyer named Daniel Hart stared at a stack of unopened letters. They came every week. Pleas for help. Wrongful convictions. Forgotten men screaming into the void of the justice system. Most were impossible. Some were lies. A few were true. Daniel had learned the difference the hard way. He was 32, fresh-faced, and already exhausted in the way only idealists become when reality keeps punching back. His nonprofit firm had exactly 3 employees, a broken copier, and a reputation for taking cases no one else would touch. That was why the letter from Elijah Mercer caught his eye. It wasn't long. No dramatic language. No legal arguments. Just a single page written in careful block letters. "I am scheduled to die for a crime I did not commit. Please help me prove it." Daniel read it 3 times. Then he noticed the detail at the bottom. Time of murder, 11:42 p.m. Daniel leaned back in his chair. Because according to the documents attached, Elijah Mercer had clocked out his job at Pulp Mill at 12:05 a.m., 23 minutes after killing 30 miles away. And no one at trial had mentioned it. The drive to Holman Correctional Facility took 4 hours. Daniel rehearsed the meeting in his head the entire way. He'd learned not to promise anything. Hope was dangerous in places like this. It could get a man killed faster than despair. When Elijah was escorted into the interview room, Daniel almost didn't recognize him from the mugshot. He looked older, smaller, like the prison had already started erasing him. Elijah sat down, hands cuffed to the table, eyes locked on Daniel like he was afraid to blink. "They told me you wouldn't come," Elijah said. Daniel swallowed. "I'm here." For the next 2 hours, Elijah told his story. He talked about working the late shift, about stopping for gas, about coming home to his wife asleep on the couch, about waking up to police banging on the door, about the interrogation that lasted all night, the threats, the promises, the way his words had been twisted until they barely sounded like English anymore. I didn't know my rights. Elijah said, I thought if I just answered, they'd see I was innocent. Daniel didn't interrupt. When Elijah finished, the room felt heavy, like the air itself was waiting. Why do you think they picked you? Daniel asked finally. Elijah hesitated. Then he said, because I was easy. The deeper Daniel dug, the uglier the case became. The witnesses, all had changed their statements at least once. One had a pending charge, quietly dismissed days after testifying. The jailhouse informant, a career criminal who'd received a reduced sentence in exchange for a confession. The crime scene photos showed something else too, something no one had followed up on. Tire tracks behind the bar. Not Elijah's truck. Different width, different tread. And then there was a victim. Her name was Rebecca Nolan, 34, divorced, known to argue with customers who drank too much or tipped too little. But buried in the police file was a single report that made Daniel's stomach tighten. 2 weeks before her death, Rebecca had filed a complaint against a local businessman for assault. The complaint had gone nowhere. The businessman's name was Thomas Hale, and he happened to be one of the largest donors to the county sheriff's re-election campaign. When Daniel requested the full evidence file, the clerk hesitated. Some of that's sealed, she said. By who? She didn't answer. Daniel filed motions. He requested hearings. He asked for forensic retesting. Every step forward felt like walking into a wall made of polite smiles and closed doors. The message was clear. This case was not meant to be reopened. Then the threats started. First, a voicemail with no words, just heavy breathing. Then a note slipped under the office door. Let the dead stay dead. Daniel took it to the police. They shrugged. One night, as Daniel sat alone reviewing transcripts, his phone rang. Unknown number. He almost ignored it. Almost. There's something you need to see, a voice said. Female. Nervous. I worked at the Magnolia Lounge. Daniel's heart started racing. Where are you? Not on the phone, she said. Meet me tomorrow. Midnight. Old county storage facility. The line went dead. Daniel didn't sleep. The storage facility was a rusted concrete building on the edge of town, long abandoned. The moon hung low, casting shadows that made every pile of debris look like a crouching figure. Daniel waited in his car, engine running. At 12:07 a.m., a woman emerged from the darkness. She looked over her shoulder before approaching, hands shaking. I didn't testify, she said quickly. They told me not to. They said it would ruin my life. What did you see? Daniel asked. She took a breath. I saw Rebecca argue with a man behind the bar. He was angry, real angry. She told him to leave. He grabbed her arm. Did you recognize him? The woman nodded. It was Thomas Hale. Daniel felt the ground shift beneath him. Before he could respond, headlights flared behind them. A truck roared into the lot. The woman screamed. Daniel turned just as a door slammed open, and everything went black. When Daniel woke up, he was alone. His phone was gone. His car keys lay 20 feet away. There was blood on the gravel. That wasn't his. The woman had vanished. So had the witness who could save Elijah Mercer's life. But that wasn't the worst part. Back at his office the next morning, Daniel found something waiting on his desk. An evidence envelope. Inside was a photograph the jury had never seen. A security camera still from the Magnolia Lounge parking lot. Time-stamped 11:39 p.m. Rebecca Nolan was standing outside the bar. And behind her, clear as day, was Thomas Hale's truck. The case wasn't just corrupted. It was a setup, and someone was willing to kill to keep it buried. The photograph burned in Daniel Hart's hands like contraband. He stared at it under the flickering fluorescent light of his office, the hum of the broken AC unit rattling his nerves. Thomas Hale's truck was unmistakable. Custom rims, a dented tailgate, a faded campaign sticker peeling at the corner. Time-stamped minutes before Rebecca Nolan was murdered. Evidence that could shatter the case. Evidence someone never intended to surface. Daniel didn't take it to the police. Not yet, because experience had taught him something brutal. When corruption runs deep, the system doesn't protect the truth. It buries it. By morning, rumors were already spreading through the county courthouse. Daniel could feel it in the way conversations stopped when he walked past, in the way clerks suddenly couldn't find files that had been sitting on their desks for months, in the way the sheriff avoided eye contact like Daniel carried a disease. When Daniel filed an emergency motion to stay Elijah Mercer's execution, the clerk sighed. "Judge Collins won't like this," she said quietly. Daniel met her eyes. "I don't care." The hearing was set for 48 hours later. 48 hours to prove that the state of Alabama had sentenced an innocent man to die. On death row, Elijah Mercer was given the news through a crackling intercom. "They found something?" he asked. "Yes," Daniel said during their next visit. "But I need you to understand, it's dangerous." Elijah let out a short, humorless laugh. "Everything about this place is dangerous." Daniel slid the photograph across the table. Elijah stared at it for a long time. "That truck," he said slowly. "I've seen it before." Daniel leaned forward. "Where?" "At the mill," Elijah said, "months before the murder. Thomas Hale used to come by. Talk to management. He was trying to buy the land." Daniel's pulse quickened. "Did anyone else see him?" Elijah nodded. "Plenty of people." It was motive. Money, power, silence. And suddenly, Rebecca Nolan's death wasn't random at all. That night, Daniel's office was broken into. Nothing was stolen, except the photograph. The desk drawers were left open. Paper scattered like someone wanted him to know they'd been there. The message was unmistakable. "You're not supposed to have this." Daniel called his colleague, Maya Brooks, a former prosecutor who'd left the system after watching too many cases rot from the inside. "They're spooked," she said after hearing everything. "Which means we're close." "Or dead," Daniel replied. "Same thing sometimes." Maya paused. "You need to get this evidence duplicated. Everywhere. The moment it exists in more than one place, they lose control." Daniel nodded, even though she couldn't see him. The problem was witnesses. The woman from the storage facility, her name turned out to be Lisa Bennett, had vanished. Her apartment was empty, phone disconnected, car missing. Daniel tracked down another Magnolia Lounge employee, a bartender named Carl. Carl lasted 30 seconds into the conversation before slamming the door. "I don't know anything," he shouted through the wood. "Leave me alone." Daniel stepped back just as a gunshot exploded through the doorframe. The bullet missed his head by inches. When the police arrived, Carl was gone. So was the gun. The report would later list it as inconclusive. Judge Collins presided over the emergency hearing with thinly veiled irritation. "Mr. Hart," he said, tapping his gavel, "you're asking this court to believe that an entire investigation, prosecution, and jury verdict were compromised." Daniel stood alone at the defense table. "Yes, Your Honor," he said. "That's exactly what I'm saying." The prosecution smirked. Daniel laid out the inconsistencies, the altered witness statements, the informant deal, the missing forensic tests, and finally, the existence of security footage. The courtroom murmured. Judge Collins leaned forward. "Do you have this photograph with you?" Daniel hesitated. "No," he said, "because it was stolen last night." The smirk widened. Judge Collins sighed. "Then we are left with allegations and speculation." Daniel's jaw tightened. "There's a man scheduled to die in 3 weeks." "That is not this court's concern today," Collins replied coolly. Motion denied. The gavel struck. Elijah Mercer's execution date stood. Outside the courthouse, a black sedan idled across the street. Daniel noticed at the moment he stepped onto the sidewalk. The engine revved as he moved. So did the sedan. Daniel ducked into a coffee shop, waited 10 minutes, then exited through the back. The sedan was waiting. Panic crawled up his spine. He ran. The chase cut through alleys and side streets, Daniel's lungs burning as the sedan crept closer, relentless and quiet. Just when he thought his legs would give out, a patrol car turned the corner. The sedan sped away. The officer barely glanced at Daniel. "Everything okay?" he asked. Daniel nodded. He lied. That night, Maya made a discovery that changed everything. She'd been digging through archived records, chasing the business dealings between Thomas Hale and the county. Buried in a zoning file was a sealed memo. Rebecca Nolan had been subpoenaed. She was set to testify in a civil case against Hale over a disputed land acquisition. The Magnolia Lounge sat directly on the property Hale wanted. Rebecca had refused to sell. 2 weeks later, she was dead, and Elijah Mercer was convenient. Maya didn't get to tell Daniel in person. Her car was run off the road on Highway 17. By the time emergency services arrived, she was unconscious, her laptop crushed, hard drive missing. The official cause? A tragic accident. Daniel stood in the hospital hallway, hands shaking. This wasn't legal warfare anymore. This was survival. With the clock ticking, Daniel made a risky decision. He went public. A journalist from a national outlet agreed to meet him off the record. Daniel laid everything out: the stolen evidence, the intimidation, the missing witnesses. The journalist listened silently. "If this is true," she said finally, "someone very powerful is about to be exposed." Daniel nodded. "Or they'll kill me first." The article dropped 2 days later. It exploded. Social media lit up. Protesters gathered outside the prison. Hashtags trended. Suddenly, Elijah Mercer's name wasn't just a case number. It was a movement. The governor's office announced a review. The sheriff called it a media circus. Thomas Hale released a statement denying everything. Then he disappeared. The last piece came from an unexpected place. A prison guard approached Daniel during a visit. "I wasn't supposed to see this," the guard whispered, slipping a folded paper into Daniel's hand. "But it's wrong. All of it." Inside was a copy of an evidence log entry. A revolver. Logged in. Then removed. Signed out by Detective Ray Collins, the sheriff's brother. The murder weapon had existed, and it had been buried. Daniel felt a cold certainty settle over him. They hadn't just framed Elijah Mercer. They'd erased the truth. As Daniel left the prison that evening, his phone buzzed with a single text message. "Unknown number. You should have stopped." He looked up just as a figure stepped out of the shadows near his car. The figure raised a gun and pulled the trigger. The shot echoed across the prison parking lot, like a door slamming shut on the future. Daniel Hart felt the impact before he heard the sound, a violent shove to his shoulder that spun him sideways. He hit the ground hard, gravel biting into his palms. For a split second, his mind went blank, filled only with white noise and the taste of blood. Then pain arrived, hot and blinding. The gun clattered against the pavement. A shout cut through the darkness. "Drop it. Now!" The shadowed figure bolted, disappearing between the parked cars as armed guards poured out of the facility. One of them knelt beside Daniel, pressing a hand against his shoulder. "You're hit," the guard said. "Stay with me." Daniel looked down. The bullet had torn through muscle, missing bone by inches. Luck, or something like it. As sirens wailed in the distance, Daniel thought of one thing. They tried to kill me, which meant the truth was real. The attempt on Daniel's life detonated the case wide open. By morning, national news trucks lined the road outside Holman Correctional Facility. The governor ordered an independent investigation. Federal agents arrived quietly, flashing badges no one in the county had seen before. Suddenly, doors that had been sealed for years cracked open, and what spilled out was rot. Detective Ray Collins was arrested first. They found the revolver in a storage locker he'd rented under his brother-in-law's name. Ballistics matched it to the bullets pulled from Rebecca Nolan's body. Collins didn't speak during the arrest. He didn't need to. The evidence spoke for him. Under interrogation, he lasted 6 hours. Then he broke. Collins admitted to falsifying reports, coercing witnesses, and destroying evidence. He claimed he'd been following orders, though he refused to say whose. He said Elijah Mercer had been selected because he was clean, no priors, no connections, no one who'd fight hard enough to make noise. Someone the town could forget. Rebecca Nolan, Collins confessed, had become a problem. She wouldn't sell, he said flatly. She wouldn't shut up. When agents asked who pulled the trigger, Collins went quiet. "I didn't," he said, "but I made sure it went away." Thomas Hale was found 2 states over. Alive. Terrified. He tried to run when federal agents kicked in the motel door. He didn't get far. In custody, stripped of lawyers and leverage, Hale finally told the truth. He hadn't planned to kill Rebecca Nolan. He'd planned to scare her. The argument behind the bar had spiraled. She'd threatened to testify, to expose the backroom deals, the bribes, the stolen land. Hale said he'd lost control. The gun had been in his truck. "I didn't mean to pull it," he sobbed. "I just wanted her quiet." The second shot, the one to the head, had been Collins' idea. "Make sure," Collins had told him. Elijah Mercer was removed from death row at dawn. The guards didn't meet his eyes as they unlocked the cell. He stepped out slowly, like the floor might disappear beneath him. "Is this real?" he asked. Daniel, his arm in a sling, stood waiting at the end of the corridor. "Yes," Daniel said. "It's real." Elijah closed his eyes. For the first time in 7 years, he cried. The emergency hearing took place in a packed federal courtroom. This time, Judge Collins was not on the bench. This time, the evidence was undeniable. The stolen revolver, the altered logs, the coerced testimony, the financial records tying Thomas Hale to the sheriff's office, the prosecutor's campaign, and the judge who'd signed Elijah's death warrant. The conviction was vacated. The charges were dismissed with prejudice. Elijah Mercer was a free man, but freedom came with a cost. Outside the courthouse, reporters shouted questions as Elijah stepped into sunlight. He shielded his eyes, squinting like someone emerging from a long underground tunnel. "Do you forgive them?" a voice called out. Elijah paused. "I don't know how yet," he said honestly. "But I know this. If one man can be buried alive by a lie, it can happen again. To anyone." Daniel watched from the steps, his chest tight. The system hadn't failed. It had worked exactly as designed. Thomas Hale was sentenced to life without parole. Detective Ray Collins received 35 years in federal prison. The sheriff resigned. The prosecutor retired early. No one else was charged. The judge issued a statement expressing regret. It wasn't an apology. Weeks later, Daniel sat alone in his office, the same one with a broken copier and flickering lights. The threats had stopped. The phone rang again with letters asking for help. Too many. Always too many. Elijah visited one afternoon. He stood awkwardly in the doorway, hands shoved into his pockets. "I don't know how to do this," Elijah said. "Out here." Daniel smiled faintly. "None of us do." Elijah nodded. "They took 7 years from me." "I know. And they'll never give them back." "No," Daniel said quietly. "They won't." Elijah hesitated. "So why do you keep doing this?" Daniel looked around the office, at the stacks of files, at the names of people still trapped behind concrete and steel. "Because mercy," he said, "is the only thing stronger than power." Elijah extended his hand. Daniel shook it. Months later, a quiet report surfaced in a legal journal. A footnote, barely noticed. It detailed procedural irregularities in dozens of cases handled by the same county during the same decade. Some convictions were overturned. Most were not. The system corrected just enough to survive. On the anniversary of Rebecca Nolan's death, someone left flowers outside the abandoned Magnolia Lounge. No card, no name, just a single note tucked beneath the ribbon. She tried to tell the truth. Daniel received one last message that night. "Unknown number. You won this one." Daniel stared at the screen for a long time before setting the phone face down. He knew better than to believe it, because somewhere, in some quiet courtroom, another Elijah Mercer was being sentenced, and no one was listening. Not yet. And if the story shook you, unsettled you, or made you angry, good, because the next one, it's even darker. Stay close. You won't want to miss it.